We were hunters and foragers. The frontier was everywhere. We were bounded only by the earth and the ocean and the sky. The open road still softly calls. Our little terraqueous globe is the madhouse of those 100,000 millions of worlds. We who cannot even put our own planetary home in order, riven with rivalries and hatreds, are we to venture out into space? By the time we're ready to settle even the nearest other planetary systems, we will have changed. The simple passage of so many generations will have changed us. Necessity will have changed us. We're an adaptable species. It will not be we who reach Alpha Centauri and the other nearby stars. It will be a species very like us, but with more of our strengths and fewer of our weaknesses. More confident, far-seeing, capable, and prudent. For all our failings, despite our limitations and fallibilities, we humans are capable of greatness. What new wonders, undreamt of in our time, will we have wrought in another generation, and another? How far will our nomadic species have wandered by the end of the next century, and the next millennium? Our remote descendants, safely arrayed on many worlds through the solar system and beyond, will be unified by their common heritage, by their regard for their home planet, and by the knowledge that whatever other life may be, the only humans in all the universe come from Earth. They will gaze up and strain to find the blue dot in their skies. They will marvel at how vulnerable the repository of all our potential once was, how perilous our infancy, how humble our beginnings, how many rivers we had to cross before we found our way. As children, we fear the dark. The unknown troubles us. Anything might be out there. Ironically, it's our fate to live in the dark. Head out from the earth in any direction you choose. And after an initial flash of blue, you are surrounded by blackness, punctuated only here and there by the faint and distant stars. Even after we're grown, the darkness retains its power to frighten us. And so there are those who say we should not inquire too closely into who else might be living in that darkness. Better not to know, they say. There are 400 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Of this immense multitude, could it be that our humdrum sun is the only one with an inhabited planet? Maybe. Maybe the origin of life or intelligence is exceedingly improbable. Or maybe civilizations arise all the time, but wipe themselves out as soon as they are able. Or, here and there, peppered across space, maybe there are worlds something like our own, on which other beings gaze up and wonder as we do about who else lives in the dark. Life is a comparative rarity. You can survey dozens of worlds and find that in only one of them does life arise and evolve and persist. If we humans ever go to those worlds, then it will be because a nation or a consortium of them believes it to be to its advantage, or to the advantage of the human species. In our time, we've crossed the solar system and sent 4 ships to the stars. But we continue to search for inhabitants. Life looks for life. Consider again that pale blue dot we've been talking about. Imagine that you take a good long look at it. Imagine you're staring at the dot for any length of time, and then try to convince yourself that God created the whole universe for one of the 10 million or so species of life that inhabit that speck of dust. Now take it a step further. Imagine that everything was made just for a single shade of that species, or gender, or ethnic or religious subdivision. We can recognize here a shortcoming, in some circumstances serious, in our ability to understand the world. Characteristically, we seem compelled to project our own nature onto nature. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. Darwin wrote telegraphically in his notebook, "More humble, and I think truer, to consider him created from animals." Close quote. We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins. Our thoughts and feelings are not fully under our own control. And on top of all this, we're making a mess of our planet and becoming a danger to ourselves. The trapdoor beneath our feet swings open. We find ourselves in bottomless freefall. If it takes a little myth and ritual to get us through a night that seems endless, who among us cannot sympathize and understand? We long to be here for a purpose, even though, despite much self-deception, none is evident. The significance of our lives and our fragile planet is then determined only by our own wisdom and courage. We are the custodians of life's meaning. We long for a parent to care for us, to forgive us our errors, to save us from our childish mistakes. But knowledge is preferable to ignorance. Better by far to embrace the hard truth than a reassuring fable. Modern science has been a voyage into the unknown, with a lesson in humility waiting at every stop. Our common sense intuitions can be mistaken. Our preferences don't count. We do not live in a privileged reference frame. If we crave some cosmic purpose, then let us find ourselves a worthy goal. It's easy to imagine skeins of historical causality. There were many possible historical paths. Our ancestors walked from East Africa to Novaya Zemlya and Ayers Rock and Patagonia. They hunted elephants with stone spear points. They walked the moon a decade after entering space. It is beyond our powers to predict the future. Catastrophic events have a way of sneaking up on us, of catching us unaware. Your own life, or your band's, or even your species might be owed to a restless few, drawn by a craving they can hardly articulate or understand, to undiscovered lands and new worlds. Each victory is only a prelude to another, and no boundaries can be set to rational hope. Our particular causality scheme has brought us to a modest and rudimentary, although in many respects heroic, series of explorations. But it is far inferior to what might have been, and what may one day be. Could the Milky Way be rippling with life and intelligence, worlds calling out to worlds, while we on Earth are alive at the critical moment when we first decide to listen? Our species has discovered a way to communicate through the dark, to transcend immense distances. No means of communication is faster or cheaper or reaches out farther. It's called radio. We are now on an unprecedented scale, listening for radio signals from possible other civilizations in the depths of space. This quest is called the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI, pronounced SETI. Let me describe how far we've come. The first SETI program was carried out by Frank Drake. His great achievement was to show that modern technology is fully able to listen for signals from hypothetical civilizations on the planets of other stars. Meanwhile, the technology for detection has been getting cheaper, the sensitivity keeps improving, the scientific respectability of SETI has continued to grow, but our fear of the dark rebels. The idea of alien beings troubles us. We conjure up objections. It's too expensive, some of us say. But in its fullest modern technological expression, it costs less than one attack helicopter a year. We'll never understand what they're saying, some of us say. But because the message is transmitted by radio, we and they must have radio physics, radio astronomy, and radio technology in common. The laws of nature are the same everywhere, so science itself provides a means and language of communication even between very different kinds of beings, provided they both have science. All through human history, some of us say, advanced civilizations have ruined civilizations just slightly more backward. Certainly. But malevolent aliens, should they exist, will not discover our existence from the fact that we listen. The search programs only receive, they do not send. After billions of years of biological evolution, on their planet and ours, an alien civilization cannot be in technological lockstep with us. There have been humans for more than 20,000 centuries, but we've had radio only for about 1 century. If alien civilizations are behind us, they're likely to be too far behind to have radio. And if they're ahead of us, they're likely to be far ahead of us. Think of the technical advances in our world over just the last few centuries. What is, for us, technologically difficult or impossible, what might seem to us like magic, might for them be trivially easy. we could communicate today across much of the galaxy. They should be able to do much better, if they exist.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We had an expansive run in the 60s and the 70s. You might have thought, as I did then, that our species would be on Mars before the century was over. But instead, we've pulled inward. Robots aside, we've backed off from the planets and the stars. I keep asking myself, is it a failure of nerve or a sign of maturity? Maybe it's the most we could reasonably have expected. In a way, it's amazing that it was possible at all. We sent a dozen humans on week-long excursions to the moon, missions that returned a wealth of data, but nothing of short-term, everyday, bread on the table, practical value, or at least not much. They lifted the human spirit, though. They enlightened us about our place in the universe. A highly visible program affecting our view of ourselves might clarify the fragility of our planetary environment and the common peril and responsibility of all the nations and peoples of Earth. There's something more. Spaceflight speaks to something deep inside us. Many of us, if not all. A scientific colleague tells me about a recent trip to the New Guinea highlands, where she visited a Stone Age culture hardly contacted by Western civilization. They were ignorant of wristwatches, soft drinks, frozen food. But they knew about Apollo 11. They knew that humans had walked on the moon. They knew the names of Armstrong and Aldrin and the Collins. They wanted to know who was visiting the moon these days. Projects that are future-oriented, that, despite their political difficulties, can be completed only in some distant decade, are continuing reminders that there will be a future. Winning a foothold on other worlds whispers in our ears that we're more than Picts, or Serbs, or Tongans. We're humans. In the meantime, people everywhere hunger to understand. The idea that we've now understood something never grasped by anybody who ever lived before. That exhilaration, especially intense for the scientists involved, but perceptible to nearly everybody, propagates through the society, bounces off walls, and comes back at us. It encourages us to address problems in other fields that have also never been solved. It increases the general sense of optimism in the society. It gives currency to critical thinking of the sort urgently needed if we're going to solve hitherto intractable social issues. It helps stimulate a new generation of scientists. The more science in the media, especially if methods are described as well as conclusions and implications, the healthier, I believe, the society is. There's plenty of housework to be done down here on Earth, and our commitment to it must be steadfast. But we're the kind of species that needs a frontier for fundamental biological reasons. Every time humanity stretches itself, it receives a jolt of productive vitality that can carry it for centuries. Yuri Romanenko, on returning to Earth after what was then the longest spaceflight in history, said, quote, "The cosmos is a magnet. Once you've been there, all you can think of is how to get back. It might be a familiar progression, transpiring on many worlds. A planet newly formed placidly revolves around its star. Life slowly forms. A kaleidoscopic procession of creatures evolves. Intelligence emerges, which, at least up to a point, confers enormous survival value. And then, technology is invented. In a flash, they create world-altering contrivances. Some planetary civilizations see their way through, place limits on what may and what must not be done, and safely pass through the time of perils. Others, not so lucky or so prudent, perish. This is one reason that in the long astronomical perspective, there is something truly epical about now. This is the first moment in the history of our planet when any species, by its own voluntary actions, has become a danger to itself, as well as to vast numbers of others. We humans have already precipitated extinctions of species on a scale unprecedented since the end of the Cretaceous period. But only in the last decade has the magnitude of these extinctions become clear, and the possibility raised that in our ignorance of the interrelations of life on Earth, we may be endangering our own future. Of course, we must keep our planet habitable, not on a leisurely timescale of centuries or millennia, but urgently on a timescale of decades or even years. This will involve changes in government, in industry, in ethics, in economics, and in religion. We've never done such a thing before, certainly not on a global scale. It may well be too difficult for us. Dangerous technologies may be too widespread. Corruption may be too pervasive. There may be too many quarreling ethnic groups, nation-states, and ideologies for the right kind of global change to be instituted. However, we humans also have a history of making long-lasting social change that nearly everyone thought was impossible. We have often, despite our diversity, despite endemic hatreds, pulled together to face a common enemy. Our leverage on the future is high just now. We seem these days much more willing to recognize the perils before us than we were even a decade ago. The newly recognized dangers threaten all of us equally. No one can say how it will turn out down here. But this is also, we may note, the first time that a species has become able to journey to the planets and the stars. Sailors on a becalmed sea, we sense the stirring of a breeze. It's a sultry night in July. You've fallen asleep in the armchair. Abruptly, you startle awake, disoriented. The television set is on, but not the sound. You strain to understand what you're seeing. Two ghostly white figures in coveralls and helmets are softly dancing. They make strange little skipping motions, which propel them upward amid barely perceptible clouds of dust. But something's wrong. They take too long to come down. Encumbered as they are, they seem to be flying. A little. You rub your eyes, but the dreamlike tableau persists. Of all the events surrounding Apollo 11's landing on the moon on July 20th, 1969, my most vivid recollection is its unreal quality. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin shuffled along the gray, dusty lunar surface, the Earth looming large in their sky, while Michael Collins, now the moon's own moon, orbited above them in lonely vigil. Yes, it was an astonishing technological achievement and a triumph for the United States. Yes, the astronauts displayed death-defying courage. Yes, as Armstrong said as he first alighted, this was a historic step for the human species. But if you turned off the byplay between Mission Control and the Sea of Tranquility, with its deliberately mundane and routine chatter, and stared into that black and white television monitor, you could glimpse that we humans had entered the realm of myth and legend. Once upon a time, we soared into the solar system for a few years. Then we hurried back. Why? What happened? What was Apollo really about? Apollo conveyed a confidence, energy, and breadth of vision that did capture the imagination of the world. It inspired an optimism about technology, an enthusiasm for the future. If we could fly to the moon, as so many have asked, what else were we capable of? We may have found that perspective just in time, just as our technology threatens the habitability of our world. Whatever the reason we first mustered the Apollo program, however mired it was in Cold War nationalism and the instruments of death, the inescapable recognition of the unity and fragility of the Earth is its clear and luminous dividend, the unexpected, final gift of Apollo. There are places in and around our great cities where the natural world has all but disappeared. You can make out streets and sidewalks, autos, parking garages, advertising billboards, monuments of glass and steel, but not a tree or a blade of grass or any animal, besides, of course, the humans. There are lots of humans. Only when you look straight up through the skyscraper canyons can you make out a star or a patch of blue. Reminders of what was there long before humans came to be. It's not hard going to work every day in such a place to be impressed with ourselves, how we've transformed the Earth for our benefit and convenience. But a few hundred miles up or down, there are no humans. Our impact on the universe is nil. In the last 10,000 years, an instant in our long history, we've abandoned the nomadic life. We've domesticated the plants and animals. Why chase the food when you can make it come to you? For all its material advantages, the sedentary life has left us edgy, unfulfilled. Even after 400 generations in villages and cities, we haven't forgotten. There are now people on every continent and the remotest islands, from pole to pole, from Mount Everest to the Dead Sea, on the ocean bottoms, and even Occasionally, in residence 200 miles up, humans, like the gods of old, living in the sky. These days, there seems to be nowhere left to explore. Victims of their very success, the explorers now pretty much stay home. Maybe it's a little early. Maybe the time is not quite yet. But those other worlds, promising untold opportunities, beckon. Just now, there are a great many matters that are pressing in on us, that compete for the money it takes to send people to other worlds. Should we solve those problems first, or are they a reason for going? Our planet and our solar system are surrounded by a new world ocean, the depths of space. It is no more impassable than the last.
Life is something rare and precious. There is something extraordinary about the planet that we are privileged to live on. The human species is destroying forests, and we're doing it at a rate of 1 acre of forest every second. We're doing something immensely stupid. The abundance of greenhouse gases is increasing. 1 degree temperature change is enough to produce widespread suffering and famine worldwide. We are in serious trouble. If we don't do the right thing now, there are very serious problems that our children and grandchildren will have to face.
Stars above in silent dance. Their light is a time.